Hello and welcome to the Nintendo Network, and welcome to the next installment of A Not So Brief History. Last time we went through the classic Mega Man games, so today we'll be continuing down that timeline and looking at the Megaman X series of games. All these games, most of these games, slightly over half of these games are very beloved and a huge part of gamers' childhoods, much like the classic series was. But as we gamers grew up, the tones of X felt more grown up too. The story got deeper and darker. It added wall jumps! Hot damn, now that is evolution in the series. Also, this series got a lot more lore and story, so expect more of that than in the classic series. So let's jump ahead to the year 21XX and see why this series is so beloved and remembered so fondly. Well, most of them at least. Megaman X released in 1994, following the story of X, Dr. Thomas Light's final robot. He was unearthed by Dr. Kane, and Kane used X as the model for a new wave of robots known as Reploids. All seemed good until some Reploids began to attack humans and went Maverick. So many Reploids were formed into battalions to combat the Mavericks. But things went from bad to worse when one of the best hunters, Sigma, turned Maverick, taking many of the best commanders with him. He declared every Reploid should join his cause. But X, even though a pacifist, leaps into action. With the help of his good friend Zero, they set out to topple Sigma and his 8 Maverick bosses. Yeah, the game got a little bit deep, although a lot of that was known after the game was released. But the basic premise is the same as the classic series. X goes and fights the 8 Mavericks and gets an ability from each one of them. Same rock, paper, scissors mechanic of the original series. But in the X games, your health starts off rather low. In those 8 Maverick stages, you can find a few different upgrade items. First is the heart tank. Each one of these will help your health grow a little bit, permanently. Next is the replacement of the E-tank from the classic series, the sub-tank. These will fill up if you pick up extra health items if you're already at full health. They can be used at any time, and you can grind to fill them up, making them so much more useful than the E-tank. Lastly, there are the armor upgrades. You can find these capsules in 4 different levels, and a hologram of Dr. Light will upgrade a different part of X's armor, boosting his powers and abilities. These simple additions really help to bring more playtime to the game and for more exploration. Plus, you will sometimes need a Maverick's ability to get the upgrades, like you need Flame Mammoth's Fire Wave to get the heart tank from Chill Penguin's stage. It was padding, yes, but allowed you as the player to feel yourself getting more powerful and more competent along with X. After defeating the Mavericks, you gain access to Sigma's palace and rush your way to find your friend Zero has been trapped by the evil Vile. As you get your butt handed to you, Zero escapes and blows himself up to destroy Vile's right armor. Just the right armor. Really? That's it? I thought he was supposed to be one of the great Maverick hunters. It's almost like he's a Wily bot or something. Anyways, if you didn't get the armor upgrade earlier in the game, Zero gives his buster to X, giving him the same abilities. X, with vengeance in his heart, climbs Sigma's palace and confronts him and battles it out. He defeats Sigma's first form, but then Sigma attaches to a large robot and you finally destroy the Maverick leader, and we will never hear from him again. Megaman X really showed what a game and story could do as it grew up with its audience. It took all that the classic series was doing and evolved it. It not only went deep into its own story, but it was a continuation of the classic story, something I love. It raised a lot of questions about what happened between the classic series and this one. And with the classic series continuing as X was, we all hope that bridge will be built to connect the two more. Over 20 years later, we're still waiting. A little fun note, Inafune wanted the X series to be very different, and Zero to be the next main character who we as the gamer would play as. But he was afraid it would be rejected and would alienate what had already been established, so he submitted as a side character. Eventually Zero would get his own set of games, but that's for another episode. Coming in early 1995, and I do mean early as in January 1st in America, Megaman X2 was released. The story picks up 6 months after the events of the first game. X commands a group of Maverick hunters who have tracked down some straggling Mavericks into a factory. But a new evil known as the X Hunters have caused Maverick uprising, causing 8 new bosses to challenge X. And the X Hunters have not only helped with the resurrection of Sigma, now dubbing himself Neo Sigma, but they are planning on gathering the remains of Zero and rebuild him and reprogram him to destroy X. Before going further, let's talk about these new villains, the X-Hunters. I mean one in particular, Surges. There are some very popular fan theories that suggest Surges is actually Dr. Wily, or his consciousness at least. Surges' resemblance to the Good Doctor is hard to ignore, and add into the fact that the Japanese game, Surges says, "Defeated by the robotic memento of light once again, such regret." That, and add into account Surges can make a Zero clone. I mean, yes, it's a fan theory, but it's fun. It has never been confirmed or directly denied either, but Inafune has directly denied Dr. Wheel from the Zero series as Wily, so it's interesting to say the least. Anyways, you go through the 8 Maverick stages and you can fight the X Hunters in them. If you do and you defeat them, you'll obtain Zero's parts, making the later game a little easier. Once you find the X Hunters base at the North Pole, they are Reploids, so let's assume they're okay with extreme cold weather. X battles through the facility with a fancy new armor you picked up in your travels and destroys the X Hunters once and for all. He then confronts Neo Sigma, who has a Zero clone ready to battle and destroy X. At this point, it can go one of two ways. If you didn't collect all the Zero parts, then you are actually battling a resurrected Zero turned Maverick, and you must battle him to some pretty awesome music and bring him to his senses. Then you proceed to Neo Sigma. But if you did get all the Zero parts from the X Hunters, then this is just a clone made by Surges, and Zero comes in, fixed up by Dr. Kane, and quickly destroys his counterpart before the battle even begins. But the canon route is you get all the parts. You now face Neo Sigma, who's been reading one too many X-Men comics and decides to get Wolverine claws, but he is no match for X, and you then face the virus form itself. After defeating the virus form of Sigma, you and Zero escape, and the base at the North Pole is destroyed, presumably alongside Santa's workshop, and we never hear from Sigma again. Although a very solid game, it didn't add a whole lot to the X formula. Not that a lot needed to be added at that point. X1 already did a lot compared to the classic series, but making the helmet upgrade give you a powerful screen-destroying attack instead of destroying random blocks was pretty nice. The game also started to get more lore and hints, like Sigma calling Zero something about the good doctor's robot. Even though it was more of the same, X2 was a solid game, good story, and continued to get people on board for the future of the franchise. In 1996, the third installment of the X series took place with Megaman X3. Years have passed since the second defeat of Sigma. Thanks to the effort of the Reploid scientist Dr. Doppler, the Maverick insurrection has all but calmed to a whisper. Mavericks were given a vaccine from a computer. He even created a city called Doppler Town, a utopia for Reploids, and a golden age seemed to be shining. But months after Doppler Town was founded, Mavericks who were supposed to be cured from the Maverick virus began to cause chaos. It looks like Doppler contracted the virus while researching it for a cure, and gave all the Reploids a placebo. Doppler is the mastermind this time. Well...
Sigma! How did you know it was me?
It's always you.
And it always will be!
Yeah, we know it is Sigma using Doppler to build a new body. It's like Wily. It's always Wily, except for Megaman Base, but still. X and Zero go to stop the Mavericks, but while they're out, the Maverick Hunter HQ is under attack. And a twist for the opening stage, halfway through, X is captured and you take control of the overpowered Zero for the first time. Yes, in the game you can actually summon Zero and play as him, but you can't battle bosses for reasons? Maybe he doesn't want to get Maverick blood on his saber, who knows. Zero saves X, and the tried and true formula begins once again. Take out the 8 Mavericks and go fight Sigma and Doppler as well. As with X1 and X2, you have the sub-tanks and heart tanks, but this time you can collect the robot rides. Once you collect them, you can find paths in the level and summon them to basically plow through all you see, or hit a roadblock where the robot ride is just too big. You can also enhance your armor upgrade with chips, but only one chip can be attached at a time, so like the leg chip allows double air dashes, or the helmet chip allows you to regain health as you stand still. But if you're patient enough and grab no chips, you can get the ultra chip that turns you gold and gives you all the ability. So yeah, make X go Super Saiyan. During your battles, you must face off against Bit and Bite, 2 henchmen for Doppler that have no personality, not referenced again, and really are second-rate X-Hunters, and I always forget about them. Oh, and Vile is resurrected by Doppler. Yeah, I know Vile is popular, but not really with me, so his return didn't bring much fanfare, but good for the fans. He gets destroyed again, so you find Doppler's hidden lab and face off with him. He gives X the chance to join him, or be destroyed and added to Sigma's new body. Way to spoil the reveal of Sigma, Doppler. You defeat Doppler, he becomes his normal non-Maverick self for a few moments because the plot needs him to, and you go face Sigma and destroy his new body to find Kaiser Sigma, a huge new battle body. After probably the most difficult Sigma battle to date, for me at least, he becomes his polygonal virus form again, declaring he will possess X and take over the world. But not before Zero gets the real antivirus and slashes at Sigma and destroys him, and we will never— wait, I did the Ducktales joke, didn't I? I guess I need to stop that one. X3 continued what X2 built upon and added quite a bit for us gamers to do. Adding the robot ride armors and the extra chips was really cool. To offset the extra upgrades and so it didn't feel overwhelming, once you got the helmet upgrade, it showed what upgrades were in each level. The storyline didn't do much to progress X or Zero as characters, which was a shame, but perhaps I should be happy with what is coming up here eventually. X3 is a very solid game. A lot of fun, a lot of challenges that I enjoyed. Seriously, Kaiser Sigma took me forever to figure out. If I had to give much fault, really the music of the game just didn't feel up to par. The Doppler stage music I love, but most of the Maverick stages just blend together. In 1997, Megaman X4 jumped from the Super Nintendo onto the PlayStation and Sega Saturn and was upgraded to 32 bits. The game does a bit different from the previous X series games. In this game, you can choose to play an entire story as X or Zero, not just have Zero be summoned. You know, I never did use Zero in X3, so X4 was a neat little add-on. Plus, it seems like each character has their own story. Or similar stories, just a little bit different. Well, looks like I'll be going over both, but first an overall plot summary because it applies to both. It has been years since the third defeat of Sigma, and alongside the Maverick Hunters, a new army of Reploids have grown, known as Repliforce. On occasion, they have worked with Hunters in helping the fight against Maverick, but one day the floating city Sky Lagoon. Seriously, who thought a floating city was a good idea? Have you played or watched anything where a floating city ends up good? Anyways, Sky Lagoon is attacked by a group of Mavericks who tamper with the generator who gives it floating abilities. Let's assume it's the same reason the rocks float in Pandora, and the whole city goes crashing down. Our heroes escape but return to the ground to see thousands, perhaps more, are now dead because of it. After defeating a generic opening stage boss, you run into Colonel, the Colonel of Repliforce, who X and Zero both accuse of causing this damage. They ask Colonel to lay down his arms and come to Maverick Hunter HQ. Colonel refuses, even after being told all of Repliforce would be viewed as Mavericks. But Colonel and Repliforce have their pride, so Colonel runs away. In response to being labeled as Mavericks, General, the leader of Repliforce, wait, Colonel, General as their names? For a series to have names like Boomer Kawanger and Magma Dragoon, it seems odd that they have such simple names. Anyways, General declares it unfair that they had been labeled Mavericks unjustly. Okay, I agree with that. And General wants to form an all-Reploid nation. Okay, starting to lose me a little there, General. So all Reploids can live in peace and harmony. Okay, fair enough. And he wants to do that in space. Okay, what? And the space station, which is already basically prepared, has a giant laser that is pointed out at Earth. Yep, that says peace. Also, that reminds me of Sonic Adventure 2 and the Space Colony arc. Now to focus on each hunter individually. Let's begin with X. X is ready to stop Repliforce with the help of his doofy, rotund new hunter intern named Double. So you fight the 8 Mavericks. Well, I guess only 3 are Mavericks and 5 are Repliforce commanders. Whatever, you get it. It adds up to 8. You gather heart tanks, E-tanks, and now a weapon tank to replenish your weapon energy. Oh cool! It becomes nearly useless once you get the helmet upgrade, which makes it so regular use of the special weapons are free with no energy consumption. Yes, if you use the charge abilities, they use energy, but most work better without charging them. One thing that is interesting is that you can choose what upgrade to get from Dr. Light when it comes to the X Buster upgrade. You can choose to hold up to 4 charge shots or a plasma charge shot, which is bigger, stronger, and leaves a ball of energy to do more damage. So once you get the plasma charge shot, because it is far better than the other one, you chase down Repliforce right before they launch into space, where you face off against Colonel and defeat him. You get up to the Space Colony arc where Double is waiting for you. He has been a Maverick this whole time, spying on them. A double agent, if you will. Don't boo or dislike this video because of that bad joke. It was Capcom who made him. So you defeat the Digivolved Double and then face off against General. Defeat him, not destroy, and we find out someone is in control of a giant deadly laser on this space station of peace. And look at that, it is Sigma who can float and is trying to cosplay like Death. You see, Sigma was behind it all along, pulling the strings, mostly manipulating Repliforce. So you go through 3 stages of Sigma, where the last part is not difficult per se, but practice makes perfect if you know the pattern. General sacrifices his body to stop the weapon. Geez, Sonic Adventure 2 really did copy X4. And X gets on apparently the only escape shuttle, and everyone else seems to be dead, as no one else is escaping from the blowing up Space Colony arc. X ponders if one day he might go Maverick, which may not seem like it, but is a bit of foreshadowing. And he asks Zero to do what must be done. Zero, being of stable mind, tells X he's being ridiculous, so X rockets back to Earth, and we will never hear about Sigma again. Zero's story progression is pretty similar. The big differences are he doesn't gain Maverick abilities, but but he learns new saber moves as he is mostly close range. He has been having nightmares of a shadowy figure wanting him to do evil. This is really the first true acknowledgement in the X series that Zero was created by Dr. Wily. He is also in love with Colonel's sister Iris. Iris stays with Zero for most of the game, but begs him not to go after Repliforce in space. After Zero confronts and defeats Colonel, Iris disappears, but finds her way into space before him. Iris, grief-stricken from losing her brother, has his control chip, fuses with it, and becomes a flying right armor because reasons. And Zero defeats her, but does more damage than intended, damaging Iris beyond repair. Zero loses Iris while holding her, wondering what he is fighting for, and creating a meme. I don't know, Zero, the giant weapon pointed towards Earth maybe is what you're fighting for? Zero rushes to confront Sigma, and they have a flashback when Sigma, still good and a Maverick hunter, confronted Zero in the remnant of what we assume is Wily's old lab. Zero has wiped out all hunters who had confronted him before. Zero goes in after him, gets completely owned by a Berserk Zero, but for a moment a W appears on Zero's head crystal, giving Sigma the chance he needed to hit it and knock out Zero. This is where, due to the Maverick virus leaking from Zero's capsule, that Sigma first contracted it. So like X's story, defeats Sigma, General pulls a shadow and sacrifices himself again, and Zero is the only survivor and ponders how he could not save everyone he cared about, except all the people on Earth. He even starts to question if becoming Maverick is indeed the destiny of all Reploids. X4 is a good game, but is plagued with few issues. I spoke about the dubbing in Megaman 8 in my last video, and this was about the same time. In fact, Megaman and X have the same voice actors. I feel it is handled a bit better here overall though. Zero's motivation and love for Iris seems really tacked on. Really, these are all new characters to us, so the drama and internal struggles Zero in particular go through are hard to identify it. His "What am I fighting for?" scene is its own meme and infamous. It's pretty cheesy, but still enjoyable. A huge plot hole for myself is how did Sigma live from the antivirus he was hit with from Zero in X3? And who built him a new body? In the past, they went out of their way to explain such things. It's a little, but it bugs me. Overall, the game is fun and enjoyable. An okay plot, but you got some variety with playing as both X and Zero, and they played very differently, making each playthrough feel fresh and not stale, which is good as you're going through each stage twice. But if you thought the plot was getting complicated, in 2001, Megaman X5 came out, and it was actually originally going to be the final Megaman X game, leading into the Mega Man Zero series. As we have 3 more X games to go through, I see the game did well enough financially for the suits at Capcom, and they wanted to make more. It will be interesting to see how this all works out. So the game does allow you to choose between playing as X and Zero, much like X4, but instead of 2 separate stories, they are the same stories, but with different dialogue. We will just say X so we know who we're talking about and there's not too much confusion, because trust me, there's going to be some confusion here on out. Several months after the Repliforce War, X is dispatched to a monument where Sigma has infected it and becomes a giant floating head. Alright, stealing from Andros from Star Fox now, huh Sigma? Can't just come up with your own stuff? So you defeat the big giant head, but it is all part of Sigma's plan. By destroying the head, the mutated Maverick virus, now dubbed the Sigma virus, had spread across the world, causing widespread infection. To add to it, Sigma has contracted a rogue Reploid known as Domino, who was able to spread a virus into a space station known as Eurasia, and is now heading towards Earth and will impact in 16 hours unless the Maverick Hunters can do something to stop it. So yay, a ticking clock. Those are always fun in games, right? X and Zero, along with Cygnus, the new Maverick Hunter commander, Alia, your oracle for the X series if you will, and Douglas. Why such a common human name for a mythic Reploid amongst Zero, Cygnus, and Douglas? They all need to do one of 2 things. They need to repair and upgrade an old laser cannon known as the Enigma, or upgrade a shuttle that can be flown into the Eurasia and destroy it. But 8 Mavericks are guarding these upgrades. What is interesting is you can choose to fire the Enigma at any time, even with no upgrades, and it could still technically destroy the space station. I mean, it won't happen often, but it could lead to you going to the final stages and not fight any Mavericks. I mean, it's not recommended, but I'm sure speedrunners love it. God, this is where it gets convoluted. Yes, now it's when it gets convoluted. So you get the parts from the Maverick and destroy Eurasia, or it fails and you do the shuttle thing, but it doesn't have an autopilot, so you need an escape pod for Zero, the only apparent pilot. Of course, we saw X pilot an escape shuttle in X4, but let's not tell him that. He can't die, he has top billing. So apparently the canon storyline, because God forbid it be simple enough to just know without reading a Wikipedia article, is the shuttle destroys most of the space station, but it still causes damage to Earth. In any case, the virus from the space station merges with the Sigma virus and becomes the Zero virus, because the best way to honor your good friend and comrade is to name a deadly virus after him. The impact point is called Zero Space, which might not seem important now, but it will be in a few videos. So you go through the Zero Space, not finding Domino, who disappeared after his whole point was to literally distract you and nothing more, and eventually X and Zero fight for reasons? I played this game a few times and even read what is supposed to be happening, but due to the fact that you as the player have so many choices to change how the events unfold, X and Zero rarely talk, so motivations are confusing. The best I can sense, and please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, other than the plot said so, Zero is gaining power from Zero Space and X is worried. Zero shrugs it off and X demands he goes back to the Hunter base for a checkup. Zero responds by fighting him. See what I mean? It's confusing. It doesn't make sense. So they fight until they are both nearly offline and Sigma shows up to take out X. But Zero attacks Sigma with his Z-Buster and Sigma runs away. Come on, Sigma, you aren't that damaged. You could take them both. They're both weakened. Wait, is the plot of X5 making me root for Sigma? Wow. What is X7 gonna make me do? So you race after Sigma, who reveals his plan was to use the virus to awaken Zero's true self. Sigma also talks about an old man that he met that hates X and knew a lot about Zero. So wily, but it's never really explained how, but we're almost done with the game, so let's not poke at all the plot holes. You defeat Sigma's forms, but he self-destructs, intending to take the Hunters with him. They barely survive, Zero nearly destroyed. X holds his friend and tells him to keep holding on, but Sigma still lives and attempts to kill them once again. He blasts through X and Zero's chest plates, but Zero gets one last blast off against Sigma, and I'm sure we'll never... Oh, I said I was going to stop that joke. Sorry, guys. So, at this point, I have no idea what's canon! From what I can gather, the hologram of Dr. Light saves X. Okay. And it jumps to 3 years later and Zero's dead. But in X6, the start of the game says 3 weeks later, and it's the same bridge and story. It's almost like this was not meant to continue like it does in X6. X lives, that's what matters. X6 will try to fix these issues, right? X5 really isn't a bad game, it's just the plot seems a bit rough and rushed. Adding the ticking time clock is not a grand idea in a game where you are expected to go through levels multiple times at points to get all the upgrades, but once the space station is destroyed and the clock goes away, it's a false timer, which makes me oddly more annoyed. Upgrades are handled differently too. There are 2 types of armors for X to collect, the Falcon armor and the Gaia armor. On paper it sounds pretty cool, but you have to get all the components of the armors to use them. I mean, I see why, as they don't want you to mix and match, but it was a huge letdown for me. I love the idea of different armors, but the execution just felt bad to me. Another thing that holds back X5 is Aelia. You see, she will just start talking to you, and text will appear on the screen and you have to go through it and you stop playing. It's shoving exposition mid-level. It's annoying, it breaks you out of level, and it handholds you in the 5th game of the series. Honestly, this is the worst aspect of this game. One thing I did enjoy was the Mavericks. As you fight them, you can see they are being infected with the virus, and even some of them are from Replifors. It made me feel like you were in a situation where you had to kill them to help them, to end the suffering. I enjoyed the aspect. By far not the worst X game, but it really doesn't stand shoulder with some of its predecessors. The actual gameplay itself was on point, but most everything else really holds it back. Megaman X6 came out in late 2001 and continued the story of X 3 weeks after the events of X5. He now wields his fallen comrade Zero Saber. It was a few years after episode 1, so lightsabers were popular and X just had to have one apparently. Due to the space station crash, Earth is too polluted for humans to live anymore, so they're hiding underground while Reploids have stayed topside and are working hard to clean up. The story goes that a scientist known as Gate is investigating what has been dubbed the Zero Nightmare, and has contracted 8 investigators to go around the world to find out more and bring an end to the nightmare. 8, you say? Now they wouldn't be Mavericks later, would they? Oh yes, the formula holds true. Gay has also constructed a Reploid known as High Max, who is basically immune to X's attacks. Gate is actually behind the nightmare and constructed a nightmare to look like Zero to make Reploids believe Zero is behind it all. He started to go mad after finding a piece of Zero near Ground Zero of the space station impact. And Gate has used fear to get Reploids to volunteer to help, but they are just bait to feed and grow the spreading nightmare. Luckily, X defeats the Zero nightmare and finds Zero alive. How? Apparently he fixed himself? 'Twas but a flesh wound, it seems. This explanation hurts so badly. So you continue to defeat the Mavericks, and Gate is impressed by X and Zero and challenges them to a duel. Oh god, we're not throwing the chaos of Yu-Gi-Oh! In this. Is there a Shadow Realm? Are there 7 mythical objects that you have to collect now? X and Zero travel through Gate's laboratory and defeat Max and Gate. Of course, take a wild guess what Gate did. He resurrected Sigma. Sigma appears, declaring he didn't need Gate's help and blasts him. X and Zero defeat the newly built Sigma and salvage Gate, as he and Alia were friends before Gate went insane. I'm sure we will never see Gate again. That one's actually true. We have no idea what happens to him. Let's assume he was beyond repair and is dead, I guess. At the end, you see Zero is being sealed away to remove a component. As X6 was again meant to end the X series, it was bridging a gap between X and Zero series. But it was later confirmed canon that that scene in particular is meant as a glimpse into the future after all the events of the X series happens. It was a good enough reason and helped them to get more X games out, for good and bad as we'll see. X6 didn't really stray too far from the formula of X4 and X5 had set before it. It did the same multi-armor stuff that X5, which I still despised. I like the ideas that were presented here. I like how Gate was able to make Max in the Nightmare by going over Zero's DNA. I like how the Maverick investigators were Gate's creations and not just Reploids corrupted. I still don't get, other than the Maverick virus telling them to do so, why he would resurrect Sigma, and how he was able to do it in what seems like a very short amount of time. But I kept complaining how they never explained how Sigma came back in X4 and X5, so I should just shut up. Really, the only parts of the story that didn't work was trying to mend the fact that X5 was meant to be the end of the series. Zero just hiding to heal made little sense, but whatever. Zero is back, his fans are happy. They also fixed how Alia was constantly talking. It is now an option where an exclamation point would appear on the screen and you could choose to talk to her if you wanted to. A much better system than X5. All of this really helped to make X6 a much better experience than X5, honestly. But with 3 games in the 32-bit era and the PS2 being out, it was time for Megaman X to evolve once again. In a shocking and brave move, Capcom decided to skip over the 7th game and just make Megaman X8. Really? Fine, I'll talk about Megaman X7. In 2003, Megaman X7 was released for the PlayStation 2. And well, they tried to change up the game a bit with adding 2D and 3D segments into the game. But let's get into the gameplay after the plot. Sometime after X6, Reploids had built the world back up from the Nightmare and Eurasia incidents, but Maverick crime was on the rise. The Maverick hunters try their best to quell the uprising, but since X had retired from active duty to find a more peaceful, non-violent solution, because Sigma has been defeated 6 times before in a non-violent way, a new vigilant faction known as Red Alert has been picking up the slack. But one day the methods of Red Alert start to get a bit too extreme, and a young new model Reploid known as Axel leaves Red Alert. But the leader of Red Alert, Red, seriously, naming your faction Red Alert when your name is Red seems a bit vain, but whatever, sends a mechanoid to get Axel back, but causes widespread destruction. Zero runs into the AWOL young Reploid and helps defeat the giant machine. But Red, not wanting to lose the powerful Axel and his DNA-changing abilities, proposes a challenge to the Hunters. He will release the Mavericks all over the world, and members of Red Alert and the Hunters must defeat as many as they can, and whoever defeats the most gets Axel. Being as the Hunters have no choice but to take down the Mavericks, they agree, with X stating he will not fight. Dr. Light really knew what the future needed, a pacifist. So as you can tell, X is not playable in Megaman X7. Well, not to start off with. Once you defeat the 8 members of Red Alert or rescue 65 helpless Reploids, he is unlocked. But this is one of the issues with X7. X not being playable for most of the game is just weird. And I get they're trying to go by his apparent personality of him being a pacifist, but for 6 games he has known he has had to fight, or innocent people and Reploids would be hurt. I can see wanting to maybe retire when no big threats come along, but the moment Red challenged them and freed who knows how many Mavericks, he should have jumped back into action right that moment. Anyways, on a positive note, after defeating each Red Alert member, we get story, slowly in some cutscene. We see why Axel ran away from Red Alert as their means became more extreme. We learn that Red Alert was being manipulated by someone named the Professor. It's Sigma, right? Let me guess, it's Sigma. Yep, shocker. So Sigma takes over Red's men with the Maverick virus, forcing Red to use everything he has to capture Axel, as his DNA capture ability could get Sigma, Zero, and X's DNA. So after defeating all the Red Alert members, you face off against Red, who after defeating him, tells the trio that he has set the place to self-destruct. Of course Sigma comes out and you must face him in two forms, the second one being in outer space apparently for some reason. After what seems like defeating him, he comes back in a surprise, badly damaged. Axel tricks him with his DNA ability and turns into Red, making Sigma thinks he has an ally, but Axel blasts Sigma. Afterwards, Axel joins the Hunters, to X's dismay, which is not really touched upon again. Zero has a dream, again foreshadowing the Zero series, showing X might one day be his enemy. Overall, the plot is not too bad. I think it's leaps above X5 and X6, other than I don't understand how no one in Red Alert really knew who Sigma was and just called him Professor. How does no one know who Sigma is? The plot was refreshing to say the least beyond that. Axel, who has become a staple of the cast, really isn't too bad himself. Interesting, if not overly done storyline about a youth who joins veteran fighters. The voice acting in the game though, my god, they sound so stale and stiff. But really, we have gotten used to bad voice acting in Mega Man games. And truly, if this was the worst offense of the game, I'd still call it a decent one. But if there's one thing that Mega Man X7 is known for, it is the gameplay. Look, I see how this style came to be. For years, the most popular 2D platformers were evolving into 3D games, and Mega Man wasn't. But what happened here was a clunky control, stiff characters, unfair death after death after death, and it's just somewhat of a broken game. Watch this! I posted this on Twitter. In the middle of my fight against Soldier Stone Kong, he just vanished. Oh, and my head and arm does too when I fire my weapon. No clue if this was present in the original game as I've been playing the Legacy Collection. X7 was a chore. Where X5's story was bad, at least the gameplay was good. I found myself honestly hating going through this game. Something I never said about a Mega Man game before. Something I never thought a Mega Man game could do to me. I avoided this game until recently for this video, and I always thought, yeah, X7 is bad, but it can't be that bad. Oh boy, was I wrong. In 2004, Megaman X8 came back with classic 2D style gameplay with 3D graphics. The story in this one is humans have grown frustrated with Reploids and them going Maverick, so the most logical step was to build a giant elevator to relocate to the moon. The Jacob project was started using the new generation of Reploids. You see, Axel was a stepping stone for these new Reploids who can turn into other ones. One day, as the Jacob project was moving along well, an elevator had an accident and flew off the literally sky-high structure and plummeted to the ground. X was on patrol and a large group of familiar-looking Reploids emerged. It was dozens of Sigmas, except one, a new generation Reploid known as Lumine, who was in charge of the orbital elevator. The Sigmas began to form back into their original Reploid forms. Lumine explained that Sigma's body was preferred as it to help survive the crash, as Sigma had a powerful body. It is revealed that the new generation of Reploids have DNA of Sigma in them, but as a way to prevent the Maverick virus from emerging. Later, a crab mechanoid was causing chaos, and the trio of hunters, X0 and Axel, go to investigate. They run into Vile, who's alive again? Not really explained, but Zero talks to him like he's been revived for a while and he's wanted. I don't know, and the game really doesn't touch upon it, but Vile has kidnapped Lumine. Vile escapes and 8 new generation Reploids are causing trouble, so the hunters are on the move to stop the Mavericks, find Vile, and save Lumine. After X7, they brought X8 back to how the series was supposed to be, 2D but in a 3D world, and it really works. You can choose 2 hunters to go into a stage and jump between them, much like in X7. You also get a screen clearing attack. You can also play as X from the start of the game. What a concept! You also get to choose the navigator. Alia is joined by 2 other female Reploids who can either give you enemy advice or help you with different branches in the level and hidden items. Speaking of items, they have gone back to allowing X to use the armor upgrades as he gets them, but there's still 2 armors. A new neutral armor allows you to mix and match them, which is a clever way to let you play around a bit with different abilities. You also have medals and chips. As you defeat Mavericks, medals will drop and the navigators can make retries, which are basically lives, health, and tank weapons, and also improve your powers and abilities. Another thing that was brought over from X7 is some character dialogue between the Maverick stages. It is little, but adds a lot of character for the hunters and navigators. For the first time, the hunters suspect Sigma off the bat, realizing that all Axel did was shoot him out of a window at the end of X7, and he has come back from much worse. It's a bit refreshing that they aren't fooled that it is someone else and Sigma's the grand mastermind of this game. After realizing Vile and Sigma are on the moon because they want to destroy the imperfect world of Earth and start a new perfect utopia on the moon, like so many villains have tried, the hunters scale the elevator to destroy Vile until Capcom decides to bring him back because he is a fan favorite and nostalgia is an easy cash grab, and you prepare to fight Sigma. On a side note, I really like how when you fight the 8 Mavericks again and you beat them, they become regular new generation Reploids using the copy ability. It's pretty clever and a good way to explain how they were revived so quickly. So you face down the new weird looking Sigma and find Lumine. But wait, there's a twist. Lumine was the mastermind behind it all. Lumine declares that the new generation Reploids can go Maverick at will, and Sigma has done what he's meant to do, and it is implied he is gone for good. During Lumine's first form, he uses abilities from the 8 Mavericks, but gaining their weaknesses. Again, pretty clever honestly. The second form is an angel-like design though, which is just bland. After defeating both forms, Lumine's body produces a tentacle that crashes into Axel's head crystal, knocking him unconscious. Zero slashes at the tentacle and X blasts Lumine and destroys him. On the way back down to Earth on the elevator, Zero and X ponder their future and the future of all Reploids. X8, honestly, is a great game. The controls feel really good. Going back to how the game was before X7 was the right move. The voice acting, for the most part, was pretty good too. Something pretty rare for a Mega Man game. The story also doesn't feel too convoluted, and the twist was predictable, but still better than the twist of Sigma was behind it all from the beginning. There was an open-ended ending. No real answers for the hunters. They beat the villain, but didn't feel like they won the day. A mature tone that wasn't too mature and trying too hard. All that praise comes with some buts though. The navigators were a good idea on paper, but really you just use palette, as she would lead you to items and upgrades. The medals are an okay idea to upgrade the hunters, but I never used it all too much other than giving the hunters the ability not to die on spikes. Some levels were super long, and then there's one level where you're chasing a Maverick at nighttime in a city on a hover bike. Someone at Capcom must have really liked Attack of the Clones. And I rarely used Axel. His copy ability is neat, but I'd rather have X as my long range and Zero as my close range double jumper. But the biggest sin of this game is no one can explain where is Douglas, the life and soul of the Maverick Hunters. For this retrospective video, I had played X1 and 6 before, and never played X7 or 8. It is really interesting how different the two are, and I wonder if X7 didn't cause the harm to the franchise it did, if X8 would have not been the last X game in the main series to come out. X8 really put the series back on track. I know the series was meant to be done in X5 to usher in the Zero series, but I still love the X games. But we're not quite done. There were 2 more games we were going to talk about. Unlike the original Classic series, the X series didn't have a ton of side games. They did have the 2 collections, the X Collection and X Legacy Collection. But there was also an X RPG. Megaman X Command Mission came out in 2004 and is set in 22XX, so technically placing it at the end of the X timeline, although I can't really figure out if this game is considered canon or not. In the game, a new metal, Force Metal, is discovered and a new city is built over the ocean. A band of Reploids remove all humans from the city, and the hunters move into action to stop the uprising and the using of the Force Metal for evil. You have X, Zero, and Axel, who is apparently okay after the Lumine thing, as potential team members for this RPG. But there are even more characters you can choose from. Also, you will have Cinnamon on your team for healing, so work around that. The game is not too bad, a pretty okay plot, some good twists, and the gameplay is pretty fun too. My only wish is there were more nods to the past games, like they rebuilt the old Mavericks with Force Metal and it's a revamped look and power. It could have been really interesting, but as is, it's a fun side RPG. They also made Megaman Maverick Hunter X in 2006 for the PSP. This is going to sound familiar if you watched my Classic Series one. So this was a retelling of the first X game, but changed a bit. It was originally meant to begin the retelling of X1 through 6, but as there is just one, it didn't perform well. I said this in my last video and I'll say it again. If it was on a Nintendo system, it would have done a lot better. Just saying. This game has a lot of changes though. First off, once you complete the game, you have a what if alternate mode with Vile. Vile uses parts from the Mavericks he destroys and attaches them to himself for their abilities. Another change is the boss order, which is completely different, and I don't know why they would do that. You also got voice acting, which was okay. One thing that this game is mostly known for is the OVA, The Day of Sigma. It was a 20-something minute animated video that goes over the events right before the first X game. This was to help revamp and change the timeline, as a lot was going to be different between this and the original one. The short is nothing short but amazing for a Mega Man fan. You see the Mavericks as they were before Sigma took over. I want this as an anime. Each season could be a different game. Why must I be teased with this? I want this anime. Sorry, let me compose myself. Turning the fanboy off. Luckily the short was added to the X Legacy collections. If you haven't seen them, please do so. And my dear friends, we are at the end of the not-so-brief history look at the Megaman X series. And not so brief is using the term a bit loosely. This was much longer than I ever expected. But you know what? This is a story-driven series, so it was needed. I hope you all enjoyed this look at the X series. Next time on a not so brief history, we will be going over the fan favorite Mega Man Legends. And although a short-lived series, there's a lot to cover, including the canceled third game. Thank you for watching the Nintendo Network. Tell me who are your favorite Mavericks. Let me know in the comments below. If you like this, make sure to join the network by liking and subscribing to me right here on YouTube, and check out my other social media outlets. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have been playing, writing, recording, editing about Mega Man for months, and I need a break for something non-Mega Man related. Oh, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.